Got it.
Okay.
All right.
We're recording.
So welcome to the VSTA's Outdoor Education. This is the final webinar that we have, and we're excited because we're going to be able to connect today with some people who work with K-12, I believe, K-12 educators, and getting kids out and excited about outdoor education in lots of different settings. And so we have our guests with us today, and we have asked that they introduce who they are, the organization that they belong to, and just generally what their organization does. So Jen, let's start with you.
Thanks, Christine. Hi, everybody. I'm Jen Cirillo, and I coordinate professional learning programs at Shelburne Farms. And while I mostly work with big kids or educators, our team gets to work with pre-K through 12 students and educators, both on the farm and in schools. And just a little bit about the organization. Shelburne Farms is a nonprofit, and we really focus on educating for a sustainable future. And that looks like a lot of different things. We have an early childhood program. We have school programs on site for mostly K-8 students, although we do customize school programs for middle and high school educators, kind of with our staff that co-create something that could be on the farm or again, on their site as school or right in their neighborhood. And generally, the other thing is I'm a board member at Vermont Energy Education Programs. And so I just a shout out, they have awesome programs for K-12 educators in energy education, climate change. And I guess the last thing I'll just say is, I know we'll get a chance to talk more about it, is with the goal of sustainability, we really think about place as the context, and then employ a lot of different pedagogies that support that. So it might be civic engagement and service learning or project-based learning. It could be tying in literacy and science. But the idea is that we really want young people to experience their place and become better stewards of their place. And so that happens in a variety of ways. And that could be a one-off school program that kids come every year, or it could also be a deep dive into something like Indigenous perspectives on place and how, we'll bring in other educators. An Abenaki educator we work with a lot, Judy Dow, and one of our educators is working with Shelburne Community School exploring the La Platte. So there's lots of opportunities to do good work together.
Thanks, Jen. Amy, how about you?
Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Butler, and I'm the Director of Education at the North Branch Nature Center in Montpelier. Have any of you been there before? Have folks been there? No. Charlie's like, nope.
No, well, Charlie's down in like
he's far away.
Brattleboro area. Like,
yeah.
Are you connected with when the Agency of Natural Resources when they do their Envirothon? Is that anywhere near the North Branch Center?
No, not that I'm aware of. We
Then,
haven't worked with them.
Sorry, I've not gone.
So I'll just drop. I will drop our website in the chat box there. So I'm the Director of Education there. That's a really loose title for me, because really what I've been doing for the last 10 years is helping public school teachers get outside on a weekly basis for extended periods of time in wild green spaces, either on their school property or in their communities to learn. And that is called the ECO program, Educating Children Outdoors. But in the meantime, that's nested within North Branch Nature Center, which has been around for 25 years. And it's just your classic community nature center, like really small. I mean, we did just finish a $1.5 million capital campaign, and we now have a licensed preschool, an outdoor preschool at the nature center. We have a brand new kind of lecture hall, and all of our offices are not in a smelly old farmhouse anymore. So we're really getting professional, really getting tidy and organized over there. And with that, I feel like this need for connecting to the natural world, right? We see that in our students and our children that are coming in. I work with early childhood educators mostly, but we work with all the way up to 12th grade. That need has gotten so big, and people have become so much more aware of it, that our nature center in itself really started to change. So instead of doing field trips where schools were coming to the nature center and doing the visit once a year or maybe 2 times a year for special programming, we are now going to schools and helping schools kind of permeate into their communities to learn about the natural world right there outside their doorstep. We offer graduate courses for teachers. We offer a whole series called Biodiversity University, which is natural history and sciences for adults. We've now started, this will be our 3rd summer, where we offer the Biodiversity University for middle and high school teachers. So it's kind of like come and, you know, learn about the natural world and then bring that back to your classroom. But that week-long course that happens in July is really geared towards how do I integrate this into my you know, year-long plan as a middle and high school teacher. So we do a lot of things. We do a lot of community science where we're banding owls and we band birds. So, you know, one part preserve 25 acres, community science projects, stewardship projects. We've got a preschool nature play group. We serve like 10,000 people a year, which is pretty astounding for a little tiny place in central Vermont. And that number has grown significantly in the last 10 years. So I'm really excited to just chat today with all of you, and I haven't seen Jen in forever. So this is great. Like we get to catch up a little bit. So thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Amy. Hannah, would you enlighten us on your contributions?
Certainly. So my name is Hannah Gelroth, and I am the Director of School Programs and Teacher Professional Development at VINS, or the Vermont Institute of Natural Science. So it's a very long title. So for those of you who are not familiar, VINS is based in Quechee, Vermont. We are a destination nature center. We have 47 acres there with almost brand new forest canopy walk that's upwards of 60 to 100 feet up in the air. If you haven't been up in the treetops, you should go to VINS and check it out. We also have non-releasable birds on exhibit. We have a avian care rehab center that takes in last year over 1,000 patients. And this year we're going to be surpassing that number as well. We run summer camps, and then the part that I do is in the education on the road to schools. So we work with anywhere from pre-K to grade 12, and we have a variety of programs within VINS school programs. And I can tell you more about those later if you're interested. But then also we have field trips that come to our nature center. So super busy. It's a big place, lots going on. And we also, oh, I shouldn't forget, we also offer courses too. Shouldn't forget that part as well. It's part of my title. Should remember that part.
Thank you. Oh, if you haven't muted, if you could do that for us, that would be great. Thank you. All righty. So I know you guys have talked about this a little bit, but if you could answer more directly, I guess, in what ways can your organization help educators build that outdoor science ed experiences? So really speaking to how we can, you did a great job of letting us know that larger, bigger picture. Let's kind of narrow it in onto educators, and what can your organization do to help build that with those educators? Thanks. Let's start with Hannah.
So our main work is sort of embedded teacher professional development, and we primarily work with teachers in the Upper Valley. So that's roughly an hour's drive from Quechee, Vermont. So that's roughly our service area, but we do reach a little bit beyond that, and we also have virtual programs that go beyond that. But our program is focused on helping teachers build the capacity to bring STEM, science inquiry, place-based eds into their classroom. And it's a collaborative process. So we come in and we meet with teachers and we figure out what are your goals and how can we best support you in your science? Are you working on aligning outdoor ed to this standards? Are you thinking about assessment? Are you thinking about citizen science? Are you thinking about how, actually the nuts and bolts, how do I actually do this? Or maybe you want support on a certain content. It's really wide open. And so what we offer is that collaborative partnership with teachers, and we work on long-term relationships, knowing that that's where we can make the biggest impact. With the younger kids, so we have programs that we offer for as young as 1-year-olds. So we call it our wee wonders, all the way up to grade 12. So the little preschoolers and infants and toddlers, those are a little bit different. It's not so much on the teacher professional development. It's more of coming in and delivering programs and helping get those kids outside or bringing that science into those classrooms. So if you are a preschool teacher or early childhood, it looks a little bit different than our sort of nuts and bolts for our elementary school. And then in the middle school program, we call that Science Symposium. And that's where we're supporting teachers in doing citizen science or doing community-based projects. And we host, in non-pandemic terms, we host an annual event at VINS where teachers come and there's a keynote science speaker who presents on the topic, and they get to meet local nonprofits or scientists or engineers, and they do activity stations. It's sort of a celebration of their hard work. And so that program is, again, a way to help teachers know how to implement those kinds of instructional techniques, and there's guidance step by step through the process.
Thanks, Hannah. Amy, can you go next?
Sure. So I think probably what I'll do is just talk mostly about the ECO program, Educating Children Outdoors, and we're actually we're in our 12th year now doing this as I think back. So what the ECO program is we work directly with elementary schools, mostly in Washington County. And what ECO is actually it's a response to two teachers from Union Elementary School 12 years ago that came to me as an independent kind of teacher and contractor in the area and said, something's not quite right with our incoming students. They aren't playing well with each other. Their self-regulation skills are different when I started teaching 20 years ago. Their ability to pay attention, develop and practice empathy. And we think it's because they're not playing. And there's specifically one teacher said, I think it's because they're not being exposed to the natural world. So she received a grant, a really small grant, and hired me to just kind of come and experiment. And we started taking one kindergarten class and one first grade class out for half to full day every single week for an entire school year. And there's the story right there. Students were coming back into the building smiling, refreshed. Teachers were refreshed, although not always the teachers were refreshed. We had many frustrating days in the early days of being outdoors with children for 3 hours at a time up in Hubbard Park. But what happened at Union Elementary School, this is an elementary school in Montpelier 12 years ago, is that the community really rallied around it. The other teachers in the school really rallied around it. They wanted this. And so from that point, we started creating the curriculum ourselves. We started creating the lesson plans based off of what we were noticing the children doing. And at that time, NGSS was just being, I think Vermont was just kind of barely dipping their toes in it. It hadn't even been formally adopted as the science standards. So at that point, knowing that that's probably what was going to happen, a team of teachers and myself, and then a couple of North Branch Nature Center staff started writing standardized lesson plans. So what came of ECO came from the community as a whole and came from the children. And to this day, we called it basically a standardized nature immersion program. So the idea is that it's every single week for extended periods of time in familiar spaces so that children are able to develop a relationship and a connection with place over kindergarten year, first grade year, second grade year. And then as they progress through the grades, practicing community science and stewardship is really, it's intrinsic, right? It just comes from within because these children have already developed a love and an attachment to these wild spaces in their communities. The other way that we connect, so now we have this model, and we work in conjunction with 12 public schools, at least this year. Yeah, was it 12? Yeah, 12 public schools this year. Some of the schools we only were able to develop, we just developed virtual content for them, which was kind of interesting, was taking like nature-based education and then making videos out of it and creating inspiring things for children to do while they were at home. And that actually worked out really well. So our staff now grew from 12 years ago from myself and an AmeriCorps volunteer to a team of 6 education staff that work across these 12 schools every single week. I could answer questions about funding at some point if anyone has them. And then in the summertime, professional development, week-long immersion courses for teachers. So you come and spend a week with us and we're outside for 5 days doing exactly what you would be doing with your students. Can you hear the thunder? It's really rolling in here right now.
I'm glad that you're inside and no one.
I am inside, but my
right?
window, my big sliding glass door is wide open.
Goodness, it sounds super rumbly. Sorry.
Amy, there's a question in the chat about, did you see?
I didn't see it.
Oh, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure that since we have you right now talking about it, that we get that answered. It says,
a certain radius. Yeah, so the radius is Washington County for those weekly visits. Yep. And the reason why is because we charge mileage and travel time. And when it comes down to it, if you are like Charlotte Elementary School was wanting to work with us, and all of a sudden I was like, you're going to be paying us about as much money to travel to your school as you would for planning and curriculum development. So what we have started to do is work out a consulting model with schools where I'll go, once a month with some other follow-up kind of online things for teachers. Really one of our really what's worked out really well for teachers that are farther away, even out of state, is our summer week-long course. So you walk away from that week-long course with protocols, emergency protocols, safety, how to be safe in the outdoors and all of those things in order to implement this quite immediately, actually. The school communicated the nature of your can you just clarify that?
Yeah, so I was thinking about, like, you had mentioned that, like, the community kind of rallied around that immersion, and I was just wondering, like, do you know how the school communicated that out to the parents in the community? Like, how do you like, what were some of the things that you might have seen that affected the culture so that those kind of innovative practices can come in?
Well, first off, it was communicated with families and the school community simply through a letter. Like, this is what we do. This is what we do at our school. It's like PE, art, the ski program. Like, we learn outside. We go to Hubbard Park every single week. And here are the science standards that we're meeting. Here are the transferable skills and all of those things. And then as far as, equity and accessibility for students, clothing, gear, all of that, a lot of parent volunteers and a lot of front loading, front work on making sure that schools had what they needed to make sure that each school, each student was successful and comfortable in being outside. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. Does that kind of answer your question? And in the past, we've run into a little bit of questions. And actually, the interesting thing are the questions always fall around the academics. Like if you're outside, then you're not hitting, how are they learning math? How much time are they spending on literacy? And so that really pushed us to develop standardized lesson plans around this and to integrate across everything. So working with an art teacher. So they're working with Lucy Calkins' writing program, writing about their outdoor experiences, rolling that into art class. And then they have like this little, parent night performance on all the bird species of Vermont. Like, how are we not learning and being joyous and growing and, all of those things in that model. So I think the great thing about it is for a lot of teachers, what I've heard from teachers over the years is it's given them a sense of the joy of teaching again. Because to teach outdoors every single week, there is a level of flexibility that needs to be gifted back to the teachers as far as scheduling and more people helping out with this. And so I've seen teachers over the 10 years, like get more creative and integrate more and look at nature or science as the umbrella, and all these other things fall underneath.
Thank you. Yeah. And then I know that I'm going to ask this to Jen, and we're kind of going off of our like scripted questions, but whatever. Hannah, in terms of that distance question also, so like, is there a certain radius? Can you work with people remotely? What does that look like?
Yeah, so our service area is the upper valley of Vermont and New Hampshire, which is 68 towns on either side of the Connecticut River, basically from Landaff, New Hampshire, down to south of Springfield, from east from like Grafton, New Hampshire, then all the west to like Bethel and Bridgewater, Vermont. So it's quite a significant range. Otherwise, if I can get there with roughly an hour's time from VINS, we'll get there. And we actually do not charge mileage. So we,
well, that's good to know. I figured
put that mileage in there. But
we're
then yes, we do virtual lessons, so that can be from anywhere.
Cool, thank you. And then I'll give it back to Christine to facilitate. But Jen, you're probably going to answer the same question.
I was just going to say, Jen, if you want to jump in, answer that question, and then just continue with helping educators out with building that science ed experience, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Christine. So in terms of a service area with youth programming, we typically serve, within like an hour and a half distance for youth, because they're going to come to the site. We haven't offered a lot of virtual youth programming, but this year we obviously did some where we zoomed into classes and kids got to meet a rabbit or a cow or a chicken. And we did some virtual lessons that our amazing education staff put together, where they traveled around the farm and you could follow the carbon cycle. You could visit, kind of do cheese making virtually. So that sort of, we sometimes get folks from New York just coming across the lake. But in terms of, then I'll talk about our educator programs and how we support educators. That service area is international. So one of the things that I think is really cool about our programming is both in person in the summer and now with virtual programming, we've been able to work with teachers as far away as Nigeria and Nepal this past summer. And in person, we have a similar reach because educators have that time off in the summer and they might be traveling to the US and looking for a program that orients around this education for sustainability, which is our mission and our approach to teaching and learning. And so part of that is really helping people build the skills to understand their place, like really gain that knowledge and skills of the natural and human communities and how to explore that and kind of unpack it and get curious and discover it. And then just sort of more, it's sort of maybe a competency around understanding the world is interconnected and doing some of that anticipatory thinking when you understand the world's interconnected, like, okay, now I get what I do here impacts somewhere else. So climate change, food systems, like those topics become really rich there and emerge in all of our places. So if you're coming to the farm as an educator, we help you experience that and then take it back to your own site. If it's a virtual program, we get you outside in your own community, exploring your own community if it's safe. So in a typical year, we have professional learning programs in the summer, which I just put a link in the chat. We're launching those. They're going to be virtual this year. We have year-round programming that is, like Hannah said, it's embedded professional development. We might visit a school and use their school grounds, or we might be engaging educators sort of in kind of quarterly retreats throughout the year. And we also do customized programming. So we're, as I mentioned earlier, before the call started, we're working with some of the school districts, Burlington and Winooski this year as longtime partners, but just sort of getting creative because everybody's getting access to federal funds. How do we get kids outside this summer and then continue that place-based learning? And I think right now the focus is on summer learning for young people, and we sort of want to couple that with the learning for the educators to say, how do we continue that and not just have it be sort of a pandemic phenomena of getting kids out of the classroom, but how do we continue that? So, you know, helping educators with place-based learning strategies, you know, using their own campuses. And for me, like one of my favorite ways is through food systems. It's like a passion of mine. We have 10 schools that are, and Christine, your school, Swanton, was 2012, was part of a Nutrition Education Institute. But really, you know, it brings together concepts like climate change, it brings in, you know, soil science, it brings in all of these really exciting topics, and then it layers on the social justice and equity issues as well. And, you know, students get super excited. And I think, like Amy was saying, some of what we're seeing is that, you know, increase in engagement for students and teachers, which leads to increase in achievement broadly. We're seeing really positive health outcomes, like kids are eating more fruits and vegetables. There's increased civic engagement. So there's sort of like more attention about how the community is making decisions and how kids can be involved in that, and how teachers are connecting their students to community partners. And I think, like Amy, like we see re-energized teachers. And that's like what I get really excited about, is the like people talking about reigniting their passion for teaching. And improved school culture, that came out really strongly in some of our farm to school research. Was school culture benefited from teachers and cafeteria staff and everyone talking to each other, kids, community partners. And then because we're focused on outdoor and I think environmental issues in this conversation, there's been an awesome impact on some of the sustainability indicators, and we want to help educators have their students take action, have that sense of self-efficacy. And when they take action and it's related to sustainability issues, we're seeing an improvement in air quality, water quality, and other metrics, waste reduction in the school community. And that to me is sort of that win-win. Like kids are engaged, teachers are excited, they're teaching the content, but then the environment wins too. There's benefits to the broader community.
Thank you, Jen. That was awesome. You guys have definitely gotten us excited about working with your groups. So that kind of leads us to the next question. And if an educator is interested in working with your group, can they get started, and where might they find the funding to help them out? Let's start with you. Go ahead, Jen. Why don't you go ahead and continue?
Okay, thanks. So I think for me, the way to start, I'm old school, is I love for teachers to call us. They can call our school program coordinator, Courtney Mulcahy. They can call me if they're interested in professional learning. And then that really allows us to help find the right thing for them. And truthfully, the right thing might be working with another partner. It could be working with VINS, it could be working with North Branch or VEEP. So we love to engage in relationship and really figure out the right thing, because we really want to serve teachers and students. And then in terms of getting onto the farm with your students or us visiting you. We have scholarships for our youth programs. And we also have scholarships for our professional learning programs. And then as we've, like Hannah was saying, their service area is sort of the Upper Valley. Our service area, as it's kind of grown internationally, we often will seek funds that support our work in the community, like Shelburne or the Champlain Valley School District. We might find funds that really support us doing work there, Winooski, Burlington, in our immediate area, especially where we see the opportunities for long-term partnership. And I think, Miranda, are you in Heinsberg? Yeah, so we might have a scholarship funds for specific groups of teachers. We always have scholarships, so just inquire about that. And if you want, you could also engage with us on Instagram or Twitter. If you want to not really call us on the phone, you can email us or hit us up on Instagram or Twitter or something like that. We welcome all ways, or just come visit us when we're back and open to the public. Just people often wander into my office on a visit with their families, and then I find out they're school teachers and they come back and visit with their kids.
Thank you, Jen. That was awesome. Hannah, same question.
Okay, and the thunderstorm has arrived here, so.
I just saw it get really dark and I was like,
Yeah,
what happened?
Yeah, I hope I don't lose power. So we could say sort of the same as Jen, just call us, reach out to us on our website. We have an interest form there. You can email me, but we also have fundings. We do a lot of grant writing to support people who want to work with us. So funding hopefully is not going to be an issue for schools, to try to make that not be a barrier. But we want to hear from you, and sort of email or phone is the best way. Or when you stop by VINS, come say hi.
Thank you. Amy.
Sure. Okay, so what do you want to do if you want to work with us? Same as what Jen and Hannah said. Email me, call me. I really, I get, it's interesting, I get emails of okay, how do we do this work? We want to sign up right now. Tell us exactly what to do. Give us the form. And to me, this work is all about relationships. Going back to what Jen said, it might be a good match for you to work with Shelburne Farms. It might be a good match for you to work with a retired teacher in your community that loves the natural world and doesn't mind being outside for 5 hours a day with kids, things like that. And to me, that is that's the beginning of, whoa, that was some good lightning. That's the beginning of collective impact instead of an isolated impact model, right? So that we are looking at all those mycelium, right, that's going out into the community and feeding and generating new life and new ideas. And so call me, let's have a conversation. I really like looking at Google Maps and what are the green spaces around your school? What are the opportunities? Do you have a town forest? And maybe I don't partner with a school, but I'm just able to kind of give you some seeds to think about, who in your school is interested? Is it just you that's interested? Is your whole first and second grade team interested? Who are the administrators in your school? And do they like to spend time outside? We just did a big survey with a school we've been working with for years because they just received a really big grant, and I'll tell you how they got it. They had a big celebration day at their school based on everything that they've been doing with eco for the last 10 years. And all the little kind of camps and learning areas at their school were open, and it was a rotation, and the families, it was in February, and it was a beautiful winter day. Actually, this was right before all the schools got shut down and the pandemic started. And families and community members could move through the forest. There were activities to do. The kids and the teachers are running them all. It was a fundraiser as well to help with clothing and everything. So you've already got children and teachers invested. They know how to do this. It was very natural for them. And there was a community member there that was a philanthropist and said, I think you should apply for this grant. They get $15,000 for the next 3 years. I mean, these are the kinds of things that, happen, I feel like, when we're really intentional and it's of the community, coming from the community. You can see the engagement in the children, and the money comes. We've had, if you tell your story and you tell your why and get it out there, I've had families write checks for money for the whole elementary wing to have socks. So there's resources out there. As far as North Branch is concerned, I mean, we're a 25-year organization, and we have a lot. I do a lot of grant writing, a lot of talking to funders. Some of them are foundations, some of them are private funders. And last year alone, we were able to raise quite a bit of money to help support schools through. So one thing that we do look at is, especially schools in need, schools that otherwise may not have this opportunity or necessarily think of it. And maybe one teacher has thought of it and has come to us. And then we look at, demographics, we look at where their location is. Are they 100% free and reduced lunch school? Things like that. And then we really hustle to find the money to match. And a lot of the schools that we've done that with in the past have now had such a great experience and such good success with this that it's now written into their school budget. And it's just part of what they do.
That's awesome. I think the one thing that I really appreciate as I listened to you was the fact that the relationships and the flexibility to connect people with what works best for them. And that seems so huge, especially with everything that's going on today.
Right. I mean, teaching, it's personal, right? Like teaching is personal. It's who we are. It's what we love to do. It's an art form. And then connecting in the natural world, there's so many different ways to do it, right? Like you could be a skier, you could be an athlete, you could be a gardener, you could be someone that loves to take walks down a road or take your dog to the dog park. I mean, there's so many ways to connect with the natural world. So, our job at North Branch is to meet everybody exactly where they're at and work in a way that we can really like move together and not a top-down curricular approach.
That's good. I appreciate that. So our next question is kind of near and dear to my heart. I'm a reviewer of NGSS curriculum. That's what I do in my fun spare time. And it is enjoyable to me. So my question, or the next question is how do we ensure that alignment to standards? I appreciate everything that everyone has said about getting kids out there and do it. Ultimately, it always comes down to, okay, so what can we say goes with the curriculum? So why don't we go ahead and Amy, you can go ahead and start us off since you just finished, and then so that ensuring the alignment to the standards.
Well, the first thing I want to ask Christine is if I can have a chat with you at a later date.
Absolutely, anytime.
If you love reading this stuff, I could use some.
Sadly, it is a passion of mine.
I like it too. I kind of like geeking out on it.
Yeah. And
the passion is waning. So how do we ensure that? I mean, my method personally has been going backwards. So when I think I mentioned this earlier, was like, what are the children doing? What are the children? Okay, when we create routines for safe learning outdoors, just like you do in your classroom, right? Like children come in, they do this in the morning, then they do this, and they know the routines, and then they are doing those routines. So it's the same thing outdoors. So we establish these routines of safety, stick play, staying with the group, all of those little things, right? So once we get that going along, and then incrementally, slowly, depending on who your classroom community is, and then what are the children doing? What's happening in the weather? What's happening seasonally? What are the children doing in season and in your ecology? Like, what do you have access to? And then that's where we're looking. So like a STEM. So last week I was documenting a STEM lesson for a publication, and we started in the classroom with materials on seesaws and levers. It started with a story, you know, a picture book, a really beautiful illustrated picture book called The Seesaw Bridge. And then, so they did it in the classroom with classroom materials. Then we took some of those classroom materials outside onto the playground, just outside the building, and then added a few more bigger materials, right? Some loose parts like boards and pieces of firewood. And then we graduated to the forest and we left all of those materials behind, and then we did it in the forest, right? So we can align that as teachers. We're like, bam, 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 bam. There we go. There are all the NGSS standards. And if we go back in the classroom, and actually what they did previously after the inside the classroom and the playground was then they made a plan inside the classroom for how they were going to apply this in the forest. And then they had to fix their plan based on what they did in the forest, right? Because what they thought they could do in the forest maybe necessarily didn't work out, or they made adjustments, all of those things. So I hope that's a clear example of that's how we assure to meet standards. And you know what, the teachers, you all know how to do this. You know how to do it better than I do. So that's where that partnership comes in, right? It's not that North Branch Nature Center staff are coming in to dictate what the lesson is. We are working together in collaboration to see what you're doing in your classroom and then weaving those things together.
Thank you, Amy. Can we have Hannah next?
So a lot of what we do is really focus on how to help teachers align their lessons to the standards. In some cases, we may actually give them a boost and kind of write out how the activities that they want to do fit into a broader storyline and how those are related to the standards that they need to address, and kind of help them through that process and kind of do some of that legwork for them. Others, it's, you know, they have that knowledge already and we're just sort of validating that, yep, this looks like you're really meeting these standards. But we do a lot of work with supporting teachers in engineering and design specifically. It often seems to be where teachers are looking for more support. And so helping them to know how to meet those NGSS standards. And we also offer teacher professional development courses that help teachers know how to do that and what it really looks like. So they're actually seeing that and thinking about that and getting practice on designing or updating or their lessons and activities to fit those standards. So we have a lot of methods that we do with that, and it can be fun.
It is fun. It's not can be, it is.
So it is fun. Christine and I just had a course together. That was very fun.
Yes, it was fun. We had a great time. Jen, your turn.
Yeah, so we start with the end in mind. And so we often use the understanding by design framework for developing units of study, and in our professional learning courses, it's our recommended way of doing it, as it aligns really nicely with the sustainability vision work. It's like, where do we want to go? How are we framing it around a big idea or a concept? And then what are those enduring understandings? And so prior to NGSS, and I feel really fortunate that I got to work with Kathy Renfrew and Gail Hall when Vermont was looking at NGSS, and we were part of that, one of the states that was coming together to review and have input on that. We, Shelburne Farms had worked with other sustainability educators around the country and really came up with what we call the big ideas of sustainability. And I said this to Maggie, I have some slides that I'll send you that you can share as a resource with the VSTA members. So we like to start with those big ideas. Many of them are similar to the NGSS cross-cutting concept. So there's a lot of alignment there. And I love how NGSS mapped the cross-cutting concepts with some of the Common Core standards. And so that's a good resource that we'll pull out and sort of help, because we want teachers to really be doing interdisciplinary learning, because we feel like sometimes the world is taken apart and kids need help putting it back together. And so the big ideas are where we start those, themes that come out in the teacher's curriculum. And then what I always say is, like, it's my job to help you, if this isn't something you like to do, connect with what you have to do, which is the standards and often the assessments. Then we really work to add inquiry into the process. So going from those big ideas and the standards and adding a layer of inquiry, we some of the research that we pull on is showing that if kids are curious and they get that opportunity to engage in wonder and their natural curiosities, it actually builds to care and stewardship. So that's sort of a key point for us. And then we layer on place. So you've got the standards, but then we really want to say, like, what does this look like in place? Or where can we see people doing the thing that the standard is talking about, or the skill? Where can we apply that in our community? And, you know, for me, it's really fun to do food systems. My background is in agriculture. And so I always am thinking about, like, is there a dairy farm that we could get kids onto where they can see this magical thing happening that we're talking about? Or is there a garden? Or is there a place where we're making cheese? Because just seeing proteins coagulate is kind of cool. And then we really obviously work with them on assessments that are aligned with the standards. And so when we can really focus on those concepts, you know, like Amy was saying, it all happens, and it happens in place. It happens through experiential learning. And my job again is like, let me help you figure out how to do an authentic assessment here that's aligned with the standard, so that you can, you know, share with your colleagues, or, you know, with your principal or whoever you need to sort of show that this type of teaching and learning does, you know, support student achievement in the standards and in specifically in science. And anecdotally, in one of our years, we did a little foray into student achievement. It's really hard to kind of take everything apart and say, like, this is the only thing that influenced it. But when we worked with this one school, we saw their science test scores go up, and the evaluator said, you know, there could be other things, like the lunch program could have changed when it was offered, and that has an influence on young people. But what we really did notice was that the integration of place, community partners, and then the really intentional curriculum development time, where teachers were getting a chance to orient their curriculum around big ideas, it seemed like it kind of tied everything together for young people. It made connections, and then they were making connections in the place, and they were getting to see the thing that they were learning about. So we couldn't say that it was only our work and our support, but it was really exciting to see that, you know, the test scores went up, even on content that the kids hadn't necessarily explored deeply, but they got those concepts like cycles, diversity, interdependence, systems, adaptation, and change.
Thank you. That helps out a lot. Questions? I know, Maggie, you said you have a question. Go ahead. You're muted, Maggie.
Sorry, that's like the 2020 phrase, you're muted. Or I'm sorry, that's my dog. I was going, oh, yeah. So aside from the organizations that we've heard from, so VINS, North Branch, Shelburne Farms, and through Jen, we've heard about VEEP. Are there other organizations that maybe you think might be good that I might not necessarily, that was my dog. I do apologize. That speaking of dog, are there other organizations that educators should maybe consider connecting to?
Yeah, I just dropped one in the chat box. Inside Outside Nature-Based Educators is a somewhat new group that I was kind of a co-founder with in partnership with Antioch University, and it is taken off. We thought we were just going to be like a regional hub of Northeast teachers who were interested in teaching outside, and you know, and we are supporting helping chapters start across the country at this point. So Inside Outside Nature-Based Educators is a great resource. There's chapter meetings, there's webinars on there, there's recordings of webinars, and then of course it's threaded in with Antioch University. So any of the, you know, classes and certificate programs that they have or conferences that happen is also really good. Miranda and Charlie, are you, I'd love to know what you guys, I'd love to know what age children you work with. just going to go off track here for a little bit before I start sharing all these resources that don't apply to you at all.
This is Charlie. I'm a former elementary and middle school teacher. I'm not teaching right now, but a couple of things. I was on a very similar call to this with the Maine Science Teachers Association about a month ago, and they had been working with Lawrence Hall of Science, who have something called the Green Schoolyards of America program, yes, and something called the National COVID Outdoor Learning Initiative, both of which sounded like great resources.
Yeah,
so Lawrence Hall's been into informal learning for a long time, and they've got some good resources there. But I was actually going to mention another thing, which is for all of you, which is I was an informal science educator for many years and working with teachers, but mostly out of school. And the big bugaboo for nearly all the teachers I ever worked with was their lack of confidence in content knowledge. So for instance, they were terrified a kid might say, "What's that called?" And they wouldn't know. And they didn't know how to get over that. And of course, there are strategies for getting over that. So I wonder how you all help early, eager, but unconfident and maybe poorly supported teachers who want to do this, but they're just terrified. It's not gonna, and one thing is, how do you deal with that?
I still feel that way. I'm like, wait, I forgot all my natural history knowledge. Where did it go? So to answer your question, I think, a lot of my work is helping teachers feel comfortable in place first, and with routines and, for lack of a better word, managing or supporting children outdoors. And I feel like once we're there, then, and allowing them to not know, like, it's okay that you don't know that that's a maple tree. It's okay that you don't know the difference between a sugar maple and a red maple and an ash tree and all of those things. Gather the leaves, bring them back into the classroom, set up a nature museum, be curious, practice inquiry together. And so in our week-long institute, we do a lot of that. We do a lot of that together, with field guides, with looking closely, with practicing the art of questioning and, journaling and all of those things. So that's a large part of what I do. Is it's okay. You don't have to know. You don't have to know all of it. You have years to do it, and you have all of these little scientists around you to help you. You have a living laboratory outside, as well as with your students, to help you learn. It's a great question, and I don't know that works for everybody. I don't know that works for everybody. Some people want to know the answer, but what are we doing when we tell a child the answer right away? I've seen it happen. Oh my gosh, what is this? What is this? What is this? Those are red maple flowers that fell from the tree because they're doing this, and it's done. Like, the wondering and the imagination and the possibilities are done, and it deflates right away. It deflates. Where did you find them? Those are amazing. They're so tiny. I'm going to get out my hand lens. How many are there? Were they here last week? Will they be here next week? Are they all the same color? Like, all of those things. You may still not know what they are. You may not know that they're red maple flower buds. Doesn't matter. Let's ask a lot of questions and keep that excitement going.
I'm just gonna jump in because I can't help myself, simply because I also love the standards too. But I think that's where there does need to be some work for professional learning regarding the science and engineering practices and the cross-cutting concepts, because learning how to ask questions to elicit responses and elicit student sense making, and just as a scientist in general, asking questions to lead to collecting evidence is like huge. That's how science moves things forward. If we know everything already, then there's no point in doing science, Anyway, that was my little connection. And I want to let Miranda jump in.
Sure. I am a kindergarten teacher in Heinsberg, and our kindergarten is next year hoping to start implementing some outdoor education. And we're actually all taking the North Branch course in June, which I'm really looking forward to. But it is overwhelming, like just to think about like, how are we going to get this off the ground? I live in Huntington and our school has been doing outdoor education, my own children, for several years now. And just to watch that progression has been incredible as a parent. So I'm excited to hopefully learn how to do it as a teacher also.
I don't know if you have seen them, but what I can do is I'll drop in the chat the link to the VSTA YouTube channel, which is new, but it does have our first keynote with Cheryl Charles, who's like mega guru on like outdoor. She literally wrote not the book, but she definitely wrote a big book about it. And then the educator panel, and I saw that Hannah dropped in the UVTPC, which is the Upper Valley Teaching Place Collaborative, and it just turns out there's the Cheryl Charles book. Amy has it. Even like looking at who was on the steering committee, we had our educator panel 2 weeks ago, and Scott Ellis and Kat Robbins were both on there, and so that was a fantastic panel where you heard questions, and it was a big discussion. So I will go and find that, and I'm going to mute myself.
I was just going to say too, the question about how to help educators. There's a really cool model of National Science Teachers Association, and I don't know, it's an older model, and I don't know if a lot of districts are using it, but Burlington School District for years, and I hope they'll continue. They've had sort of some funding issues, but they, two classroom teachers, and Tewksbury Fry, who now teaches at St. Mike's, and Colleen Kell, who's the district science coach for K-5 school. They ran a summer camp for teachers and for kids. And so it's a really cool model. And if your school isn't doing it, it's something to potentially look at using the American Rescue Plan funds, because that will continue, those will continue into 2023, I believe. But the idea is that teachers get exposed to really good science content through a professional learning program. And then in an informal setting during the summer, they teach a summer science camp. And we did that for 9 years. And then there was a pause, and then we hit 2 more years. And I think when everything went virtual, it kind of paused last year. But that model of getting folks to try stuff out with kids in that non-formal setting, where when you don't know what the it is, or you can't remember if how the phases of the moon work, it's like not the stress that it is in the classroom. And so I really like that model, and I would suggest it, doing after school programming and or summer camp just takes down some of that risk. And a professional learning community is another way where you're able to really support teachers in their exploration so that they're asking good questions. And any school that's willing to do it, Burlington also used to offer awesome internships for teachers, so they could get side by side with a scientist. And we had teachers do like living machines with John Todd, like they were doing with Ocean Arcs International. They were developing living machines, learning the ins and outs of it, so then they could go into their classroom and do that. So we've had teachers do studies with bee biologists, they could get on a farm, they could do some work at a dairy, like just getting creative and helping teachers be curious. And thanks for putting EPSCoR in there, because that's another really cool one. But the more we can get teachers getting comfortable not being right and trying stuff out, I think that's a key to them getting comfortable with science content.
I'm just going to interject there for a second. My big push is always the elementary school, because I as a 6th grade teacher work in a K-6 school. My confidence with science is because I'm a scientist. That's what it is. I do see often elementary teachers, just as Charlie said, going, what if they ask me a question and I don't know the answer? And I love all of the answers that everyone is given, because that's really what learning is about. Like, we don't, if we are always giving the answers, no one is learning. And so, yes, it might feel uncomfortable as the teacher to be the one going, I don't know. But as long as we can start to get that, and I always recommend professional development where you get to be a student, because there is nothing better than sitting there going, I have no idea what I'm doing. And remembering your student could be in that same way, and just accepting it and almost embracing the fact that it's okay to not know, but we're going to find out. So everything you guys said got me so excited, because I'm like, that's really what we are teachers for. And that we feel like we need to be experts. And I don't know, I mess up a lot. So I guess maybe I've given up on the expert part, but I just think hearing the conversation here, and we all have the same goal, it's just exciting. It's really exciting from my perspective.
I also just want to add, and to reiterate something Amy said earlier, this is probably a good reason not to be too locked into any particular standard when you go into this. To give yourself some breadth, so that however it turns out, you can go back retrospectively and say, well, actually, this is the standard. I thought I was going to do this standard, but actually we did this one here, and we did it, and it worked out just great. But to start by saying, I want to explore this particular standard by going out into the woods, unless you really know what you're doing, it could so easily go wrong. Much better to have a broader, you should do it retrospectively. I think that's what you were saying, Amy, and that's how.
Yeah, I mean, I did this work for a long time where it was like, here's what you're going to follow, and here's exactly the script and what you need to do, and it was just painful. It was painful, and so I just really started experimenting with a framework of, and the flexibility from teachers and schools of letting the children lead, letting the seasons and the landscape and the children lead. And I work with young children, so it's a little different, but I'm not, I'm actually not so sure that it is that much different. And especially if we do start with them young, we have a 5-6 group of students who have done this work in their school, coming in and spending time with the preschoolers every single week as buddies, because that's what they do. They're like, we go visit our buddies every Wednesday. Well, it happens to be an eco day. And those 5th and 6th graders, they know exactly how to be outside. They know how to be around the fire. They know all the games to play. They know how to engage these preschoolers. And they are having, because they're not going out anymore like they used to in preschool through 3rd grade. And they're like, oh, I used to love doing this. And so it's this real genuine engaged mentorship of these older students with these younger ones. And it's really beautiful and powerful, and it's good to see those such a broad age range inspiring each other and learning together.
Yeah.
It's
I
5
think that we
o'clock.
are. I know we've actually come to like a full closure. Small but mighty group. There's a lot of great information here, and I can definitely save the chat. So it was really, really, really great and very powerful and very awesome to get to chat with you all, and I hope that our small but mighty group had a good time and got information they need. If you could do one last thing for our panelists, if you could drop in contact information so that people can reach out to you guys, that'd be great. Oh, I did. Did I accidentally message you, Amy? You're muted. I'm sorry.
It was to everybody, and I couldn't follow the thread.
Oh, so yeah. So the Boulder, Colorado gentleman has moved to Waterbury, and he puts together all of those free online learning resources for educators and sessions and stuff through the University of Colorado. But one of the sessions he just ran was how to teach climate change to communities that don't really care. Like that's fantastic, so so thank you for dropping in your information, and I am going to go ahead and we're going to stop recording, and then we're going to post this on our YouTube page. And, thank you so much for coming.